Hello, my name is Matt Taylor, and I'm a product manager for Apple Endpoint Security at Jamf. I'm here today to review the evolving threat landscape for Apple platforms and Jamf's strategy for securing them. First of all, who are Jamf? We're a company that creates management and security solutions for Mac and mobile devices, with the ultimate goal of ensuring that all people who want to use an Apple platform for business or school are able to do so. Ultimately, we're here to help organizations succeed with Apple and to help simplify work. Now, Apple devices at work are no longer only viable for developers, creatives, or executives. As it says on the screen there, they can be for almost anyone that wants one. But why are they becoming so popular? Very briefly, there's a multitude of reasons. More recently, the performance and battery life for the price point of the Apple Silicon Macs has been a huge driver of adoption of that platform. The Apple platforms themselves, the Apple ecosystem, the user experience all play a key role, and the actual Apple ecosystem has evolved to support a much wider variety of use cases and workflows over the years. Apple has a really strong influence in education, with 71% of students incoming to the workforce indicating that they prefer Mac. Companies like Jamf and Apple themselves increasing the viability of these devices in business, as well as the impact of remote working and how the personal and corporate device experience has been blended over the last few years, where users just want to use at work that same device that they use at home. So, lots of reasons. No matter what the case, though, the reality is that this is happening and Apple platforms are growing in number in complexity in both personal and work contexts. A corresponding increase is therefore that the attack surface for Apple is larger than ever. According to IDC in the US, one in every four computers within business was a Mac in 2021, and that was up from 17% just 2 years earlier. There are also some absolutely mammoth deployments, such as Apple themselves or IBM, with over 200,000 Macs at their last check a few years ago. Overall, 25% of operating system market share as of 2023 was an Apple operating system. 29% or almost one third of all smartphones used globally are an iPhone. That's roughly 1.5 billion iPhones actively in use. And in the US specifically, for iPhone, it's actually significantly higher, almost double at 57% market share. On top of that, iPhone users tend to be more active with their smartphone. Research has shown that on average, users of Apple spend an extra hour on their phone every day. And so the evidence is in. People overwhelmingly want to use Apple devices at work, and it's becoming increasingly important for them to do so. Consequently, it becomes our responsibility as security people to make that possible. Interestingly, the marketing myth of Apple platforms, particularly Macs, being impervious to malware is alive and well. A company called Moonlock found this year that 28% of surveyed Mac users still don't think Macs are susceptible to viruses. And it's really not hard to pinpoint where exactly this idea originated from, as Apple pushed this narrative rather firmly in the early 2000s. On the screen there, you might find this snippet of an ad very familiar. And it's true that Apple's ecosystem, historically seen as a safe haven for users, typically does enjoy a narrower range of threats than Microsoft's or Google's ecosystem. However, on the screen, you can see articles about just some of the new and unique Mac malware families discovered in 2023, evidence that the threat landscape has evolved significantly. Ironically, this false sense of protection often means malware tailored to infect Mac is better suited to its goals, and very often finds security solutions delivering lackluster protection against them doing so. These attacks represented on the screen are only, the most high-profile targeted campaigns, largely not including general adware or, no potentially unwatched applications either. To help kind of dig into this further, I've worked with Jamf Threat Labs, our research arm, to help us better understand the threat landscape for Apple platforms, primarily focusing on Mac at first. And on the screen, you'll see the Mac threat detections by Jamf Protect and Threat Labs over the first half of 2023. And in general, across the industry in the previous year, 2022, we actually saw a reduction in malware infections of about 30% across the board when compared to 2021. So that's fantastic news. Across the board, across all the platforms, things are trending upwards. Interestingly, though, Mac-specific detections were steady and without that same decrease. And when you look at those two relatively, it does tell us that Mac actually increased. Now, the number one threat targeting Macs is still adware, and it's worth addressing that this is commonly the case for other platforms as well, such as Windows. Adware enables actors to generate per-click revenue through forcefully displaying advertising, although in recent years we've seen such aggressive collection of host information, internet usage activity that it's often bordering on, being better classed as spyware. As an example of how entrenched this threat vector is, in 2019, Kaspersky estimated that the Schleyer adware, or the Schleyer family of adware, had infected 1 in 10 Macs globally, and that it accounted for 30% of all infection detections on the platform at that time. That is an absolutely astounding number. In 2021, Jamf also found that Schleyer was using a combination of N days, but also a 0 day to achieve initial infection. A clear indication that the potential sale price of a 0 day exploit for one of Mac's foundational security technologies just didn't equal the potential financial gain of using it in the wild for just adware. And this is a fantastic example of when threat actors have less attack surface to exploit, they are consequently incentivized to optimize their techniques and procedures to ensure better success. And while adware isn't often presenting the same risk as some of the other threats detected, blocking it still plays a key role in defending your endpoints and maintaining network hygiene. Position at number 5, we have a supply chain attack targeting macOS, dubbed Smooth Operator. The VoIP company 3CX was the subject of this campaign, with the actors targeting their build process for both Windows and Mac applications alike. The attack has been attributed to the Lazarus Group, a North Korean state-sponsored threat actor. Supply chain attacks are particularly challenging to defend against as they exploit inherent trust between the organizations. As an example of this, the 3CX case involved Trojanized apps from that vendor signed and notarized by Apple successfully. And this is an important example of where built-in security is key, is a key and effective foundation, but no system is perfect, and even Apple are fallible at times. This type of attack is a trending threat across the broader space, so it's not at all surprising that we are seeing it here. Determined threat actors will really take any entry point in a targeted attack that they can. It doesn't matter if that's Windows, Mac, or something else. On the Lazarus Group themselves, they are very much understood to be financially motivated, believed to be, one of the primary funders of the organization's weapons program. The security firm Recorded Future recently reported that Lazarus was estimated as having stolen approximately $3 billion in just cryptocurrency over the last 6 years, a whole 1.7 billion of that in 2022 alone. Lazarus Group's adaptability and intricate techniques highlight the challenges faced by defenders in safeguarding against such sophisticated threats. As a tangible example of this, Lazarus has recently been observed to be fusing components of otherwise disparate malware families from separate Lazarus subgroups in order to more effectively evade detection. A dropper discovered by Jamf Threat Labs used in the Rust Bucket campaign by the subgroup Blue Noroff has since been identified as also being used to disseminate the candy corn malware, a remote access Trojan used in an entirely separate campaign by an entirely separate subgroup. And it's this focus, this adaptability and investment by Lazarus Group that marks them as the number one state-sponsored threat actor targeting Mac today. Aside from adware, Trojans remain the most prolific form of malware targeting Macs, although they do both share a trait in that they both require the user to launch an executable. And indeed, we see threat actors targeting Mac invest effort into making Trojanized apps look and feel legitimate, or even going so far as to provide users helpful step-by-step instructions for overriding core built-in security that would otherwise require an exploit to do so. We see these Trojans successfully delivered through a wide variety of means, including socially engineered communications, malicious advertising, commonly pirated software, such as Adobe Photoshop that we saw earlier this year being co-opted for a crypto miner. In 2023, we've also seen a large uptick in info-stealer malware with the likes of MetaStealer, MacStealer, Atomic Stealer, and more. And in many cases, we're seeing info stealers having a crypto theft leaning to them, with the malware specifically targeting secrets from the keychain on these devices used for accessing crypto wallets. And in both these crypto theft and info stealer campaigns, sometimes when it's both, we very typically see heavy use of social engineering targeting users in Mac businesses, such as cryptocurrency companies, where threat actors are posing as fake clients or partner vendors providing malicious PDFs and other Trojans. One final point is that in 2023, we saw a handful of new ransomware strains for Mac, a platform that historically hasn't seen a whole lot of risk from that particular area. Unfortunately, one of the strains was a sample leaked from Lockbit, a notorious ransomware gang, or ransomware as a service gang touted as the oldest business of its type in the market. A type of threat actor that has significantly and unfortunately lowered the barrier of entry for those with malicious intent. The sample leaked does actually work. It is capable of encryption. It was at the time only targeting Apple Silicon hardware. The payload itself was not weaponized, so there was no exfiltration of encrypted data, no persistence. And I must stress that no reports have surfaced of this ransomware, in particular in the wild, although the sample leaked was clearly in kind of early development stages. These gangs operate as a business and will chase the largest financial opportunity. And as Macs are now represented enough and indeed more and more, that they are increasingly becoming a financially viable target for them. And just as a takeaway point from this section, at some point, when I look at all this data, the thing that occurs to me is that at some point, all these threat actors had to make a conscious decision that targeting Mac and the effort required to do so was worth more to them than investing in other platforms, especially to do it with this level of sophistication and aggression, which speaks volumes. So across the industry, what we're seeing over the last year or so is that Mac threats caught by Jamf Threat Labs are increasingly known to VirusTotal, an increase of almost 20% in the first half of 2023 compared to that same time last year. A rising tide lifts all boats. This is a positive. This is a really great thing to see. More malicious files known to VirusTotal to the public means there are more security researchers and vendors investing more time and focus on this platform. This is a team effort. It has to be. Threat researchers collaborate behind the scenes a surprising amount, even across competing companies. We regularly share intel and take intel from some of our strongest competitors. This is a very difficult problem to crack, and the more brainpower that we can throw at it, regardless of kind of who people work for, the better for our customers. It does still leave something to be desired, though. So our position as Apple First does afford us, the ability to kind of have Apple best threat intelligence, in that even of those that percentage of files that were known to VirusTotal, 29% of those files were still not actually detected as malicious by other security vendors. So they're on VirusTotal. Someone somewhere has identified that there's something suspicious about it, but it's still not being flagged as malicious by other security vendors. And indeed, that joins the 39% of Mac threats caught by threat labs that just simply aren't known to VirusTotal at all. So what we get there is more than half of Mac threats caught by Jamf Threat Labs are either undetected or unknown to VirusTotal. And working with VirusTotal in this sort of data is always tricky in that, we can only work with the information that is public, but this is a really good proof point that simply having a commercial signature feed for your antivirus tool isn't enough. Jamf and our Threat Labs team invest a lot of resources and people time into this area, and we see dividends in what our Threat Labs team does find. More so, it's to highlight that as an industry, we have a lot of maturing to do in catching up to threat actors who, right now, on some of these platforms, are seemingly ahead. They are early to act, they are fast to respond, and as we've seen, they have a growing incentive to invest more resources as the years go by, and Apple continues to take an increasing portion of the desktop computing market share. Swapping over to mobile now, the mobile threat landscape, where platform differences and user behavior bring what I would call a different set of challenges. Spyware is generally far more of a problem on mobile than Mac, which makes sense given the different usage, the different use cases of these devices. We live our whole lives on our mobiles. They are a really bountiful source of personal information. These spyware attacks tend to be almost exclusively highly targeted towards kind of like high value individuals such as journalists, politicians. They're high profile when they're found. Think Pegasus and all the kind of press that's come around that. In the last few years, are in a relatively rapid cycle of discovery followed by pivoting by threat actors. And it's become such a high profile issue, in fact, that Apple has taken several steps seemingly targeted at this particular issue, which we'll discuss shortly. Phishing is still an absolutely rampant threat and initial attack vector. We talk about this a lot for a good reason. It's the second most common initial attack vector behind stolen credentials. And Jamf Labs found in 2022 that 1 in 3 organizations had a user fall victim to a phishing attack. Now, phishing is as the initial attack vectors are usually used to bypass mobile security protections, to same as on Mac, trick the user into doing something for them. As phishing attacks are, much cheaper than employing zero-day vulnerability exploitation, and this really just tells us that users are still the weakest link. Although organization security is everybody's responsibility, it's not their fault though. It's our job as defenders, as security people, to ensure our users have access to the right training, the right information, the right resources to ensure that they're able to kind of own the security of their own digital identity, of their own data, but also the device and the data that belong to the corporation that is in their care. Attackers are evolving this area rapidly due to just how effective it can be, and as remote work and as the working kind of paradigm changes, users are increasingly business connected anywhere they go due to mobile devices. And as an example of this, Jamf Threat Labs found in a single month of 2022, 35% of compromised devices accessed corporate email, 12% accessed to CRM, and 9% accessed cloud storage devices. Vulnerability exploitation is a real problem on mobile, with Mandiant tracking 6 mobile OS zero-day vulnerabilities exploited last year, with 5 out of those 6 being Apple mobile platforms. Escalating this risk is that in many cases, vulnerabilities are found within technologies shared across both mobile and Mac, such as the Web Engine WebKit, creating a real flow-on risk for the Mac platform. However, Apple mobile users have a strong proclivity for willingly updating their devices rapidly after release, installing new features, but also, and importantly, the security patches that come alongside them. This is a huge boon for Apple and for the vendors, as users are kind of keeping their devices up to date on their behalf. One final thing to mention, that as sideloading applications or third-party app stores are expected to come to iOS and Apple mobile platforms soon, we are expecting that we may see a somewhat of a shift in the threat landscape, as there is significant risk kind of known for that scenario on other platforms, but more to be seen in the future. Now, what is Apple doing to combat this growing and evolving the threat landscape for their platforms? And in short, a lot. Apple is not asleep at the wheel by any means, and I'd really encourage you to familiarize yourself with their platform security guide available from the QR code on the screen. But I did want to take a moment to address just an absolute few of Apple's key focus areas in the last 12 months or so. Again, calling out that these are just a handful. Apple does go to great lengths to kind of build in effective security from the ground up. First of all, rapid security response, one of the most important security enhancements by Apple for some time. RSR updates are highly targeted software patches that can be installed in flight and without a system restart. This is on top of a continuation of a downward trend of platform vulnerabilities disclosed since 2015, which really indicates a general increased focus on secure development of the operating systems. They are greatly reducing the mean time to patch for high criticality vulnerabilities that Apple becomes aware of being actively exploited in the wild, and so far have been proven to be very effective, especially as they can be configured to install automatically and silently through device management. Maturing anti-malware on Mac and lockdown mode. It wasn't that long ago that Apple admitted publicly that there was a malware problem on Mac, and this is just one way that they're actively responding in evolving their relatively, historically stagnant signature-based anti-malware tool XProtect with new scanning and entering the area of dynamic analysis as well. The introduction of lockdown mode to both Mac and mobile provides a powerful defensive tool for highly targeted individuals that are typically the focus of those more advanced spyware attacks that we mentioned earlier. However, we've actually just this week released research of how a tampering technique can be potentially leveraged to lull users into a false sense of security with a fake lockdown mode. So again, another really good example of where really strong foundational security still isn't perfect. And finally, the introduction of the endpoint security API and declarative device management, key technologies that Apple are using to democratize endpoint security, lowering the barrier of entry for software developers like Jamf to build powerful and effective endpoint security tooling, but importantly, without compromising on the Apple user experience that people know and love. All of these built-in technologies and many, many more provide effective and strong foundational security within these platforms from the very hardware up through the operating system and through the apps running on them. But no system is perfect, and as we saw earlier, threat actors are motivated more than ever by the potential payoff of targeting these systems. How do we take what Apple builds, what users love, and ensure that it's enterprise ready? And that's really where Jamf comes in. That's absolutely our bread and butter. Jamf solutions fill the gap between what Apple builds and what the enterprise needs. And over more than 20 years, we've been refining this approach and have arrived at a desired outcome or a strategy to pursue called trusted access. And you might be hearing the term trusted access and wondering exactly what that is, whether it's related to a zero trust approach. And indeed it is, but specifically it's our vision for a zero trust experience that, importantly, users love and organizations trust. And it's that last part which really stands out. Trusted access means that only authorized users on enrolled devices that are secure and compliant can access sensitive data. And in fact, most zero trust programs share these elements, but when we look at solving for these specific areas, we are always wanting to do so by starting with the user experience and building outwards from there. We are absolutely focused on delivering an experience that users love. And whether you utilize the Jamf stack or integrate with some of your existing management and security tooling, trusted access is the best way to simplify and secure Apple at work. Now, trusted access combines the best of management, identity, and security to make up these 6 elements on the screen that we believe are absolutely key to being successful with Apple platforms in the enterprise. Starting with enrollment, it's built into all Apple devices, eliminating risk, associated with insecure enrollment URLs and invitations. And this is effectively how we gain the level of deep control that we need as an organization to ensure that we can successfully and securely provision that device down to our users. Next comes automation and management. Management and security at any scale is automation. It's also very important that we leverage the capabilities provided by the Jamf tooling to do so, but we also integrate with all the typical players in the security industry to ensure that you can bring Apple best into your existing stack without compromise. Providing organizations the tooling required to configure and manage devices securely, leaning into our Apple First purpose to provide deep and broad support for the native technology Apple provides to do so. We then build on top of those to provide the visibility and remediation tooling required to ensure that your devices stay securely configured and that vulnerabilities are detected and patched as quickly as possible before that device can return to service. Leading protection against on-device and web-based threats, and this is really one of the great areas where we bring that 20 plus years of platform experience and our incredible Jamf Threat Labs team to deliver something truly unique, all while preserving the Apple user experience. Provision local accounts with users' cloud identity, allowing users to have a single synchronized identity across not only their multiple devices, but also between their device and their cloud applications. We've recently expanded this identity to now be used for physical access to office locations using Apple's Wallet, all powered with cloud identity. Just as important in the area of access is ensuring that we use conditional access to ensure that devices and users only maintain that access to your sensitive data through any app or TCP connection as long as they continue to meet your security requirements. Just like Apple, we also strive to provide a unique and unified experience across all the platforms we support, helping users understand the roads paved for their productivity. Now, that's an extremely quick tour through Jamf's trusted access strategy, and we hope you found something of value. If you're interested in learning more, I'd encourage you to visit Jamf's website to revisit each element of that strategy in more detail, as well as a broad set of implementation guides to help you get started pursuing even one of those independently valuable elements. Now, why should you listen to us? Why should you trust Jamf with the management security of your Apple platforms? Put simply, it's very fair to say that we know Apple like no other. We employ more than 20 years of platform experience and market leadership with solutions that fill the gap between what Apple builds and what the enterprise needs. Thanks for listening.